Hey, what's up guys? Today in this video, we are going to look at one of the most important aspects of our Flutter application, which is making API calls so that we can fetch data from the server and show it on our app. To display the data, what we are going to do is we are going to reference this JSON placeholder API, which is /users, where we get 10 users. Right now, I don't have any expense data, so I will be using this data to create the list view, and I will show the name of the user as the expense. Okay, and later on when we have the actual API, we will just swap the URL and see how things can be done. So first of all, as you can see, we need to install the HTTP package for Flutter. The HTTP package is what will be used to make those network calls. So how do we install that? Flutter HTTP package install. Okay, let's just say how that can be done. And I can see that inside pubdev, I have HTTP 0.13.4. The installation process is quite simple. You can copy flutter pub app HTTP, this command, and I will run that on my terminal. Now I can see that the dependency is added. What it will do is obviously make a small little change inside my pubspec.yaml file. It has added this dependency. If you can see, there is Flutter, then there is this icons, English words, which we have added already, and then this is the third dependency. But then there is one more thing which we need to do in order for the HTTP to work. I don't know if this is added over here. No. So the thing is, when you are making HTTP calls, you need permission of internet from Android devices. So we need to add that permission to Android manifest XML file. And you can find that inside, let's just go over here, inside our file view, Android, I think this is app source. No. Okay, let me see. Android main. Is it the one? Yes. So inside our app source main Android manifest XML, right? We need to add one permission. Let's go over here. Let me just look for that permission. So Android internet. I just know what is the syntax. Yes, right. So before the application, I just need to add this. So let's come over here. Before application, we just add that. So this is the internet permission, which we need, right? And then we can close it out and our app should ideally work without any problem. And yes, it does. Right. So far, so good. So next, what do we need to do? So this is done. This is done. Let's get to our code. What I am trying to do over here is, let me open up a file, an empty file, and I will try to explain you. So we will have a page called expenses. This expenses page will call, how do you say, a component, which is expense list. And the expense list component like this, right? And this expense list component will get the data and loop through each and call expense card. So if we actually look at it, this is one component, this is one component, and obviously this is one component, right? Then the question is, why are we doing such a thing? The reason is we need to understand why we are creating this hierarchy. My feeling is that the card which will be used to display an individual expense should be a component, a stateless component. It will get the expense data and it will show it, nothing else. And hence it is an independent component. But then it is quite possible that I will need one component on a page to quickly show the list of expenses. And hence this is the expense list that I am going to use. This component will be responsible for making the HTTP calls, prepping all the data, and then creating the list view where we will show the expenses. But then obviously we will need a page which will have certain kinds of, app bar and all those kind of things. Even, the add button should be ideally on the page. So we will have an expenses page. But then for now, we will be calling the expense list from our main.dart. Let's do the refactor first. Inside libs, I have pages, which is list expenses underscore list. I will change that, rename it to expenses. What does it say? Extension Dart wants to make refactoring changes to this file, right? I will go ahead and approve that. So what it will do is it has made this change over here, which is correct thing to do. Okay, and now I would ideally rename this to expenses. Get it over here, right? Yes. And over here, this class, anywhere else? No. This expense list becomes expenses. Okay, I'll just get rid of this file. It's making confusion. Okay, so is our app still working? Ideally it should. Yes. So we have a page called expenses, which makes sense now. Now we will create, let's just say, a component called expense card. Let's call this expense card dot dart. This component is going to be a stateless widget. So this is our stateless widget boilerplate. It's a class file expense card. Once we have done this, now this particular component widget, right, will need an variable called expense, which will be of type expense. Now what I would like to do is create a file called types, and there I will create a file called expense.dart, and this is the file where I will describe what is the shape of expenses. So class, this is very similar to if you're familiar with TypeScript, right? We used to create the interface, right, which defines the shape of the object. Expense, you can also call it the model. I don't know if that's the language which is used in Dart. I'm quite new and I'm exploring, so my terminologies can be wrong. I would apologize for that if that's the case. Okay, so we have class expense. Now we will create a constructor where we will initialize these. So this is one way of creating an instance of this class. And then there is something called factory, where what is going to happen is if we send some data, right, it will allow us, see, from JSON, it will allow us to create an instance. Okay, it will map over, the string data, and it will create an instance of this class. That's what we are expecting to do. So what I'm going to do over here is this factory will create, this is a method where we can do expense dot from JSON. We pass the JSON data, okay, and we are mapping it with the data which is coming from the JSON string. So this is something like JSON.id, name will be JSON name. Okay, now this might seem a little confusing right now, but I'm gonna explain you in more details when we are actually going to use this file. Okay, for now let's just say that we have this class file which describes the shape. There is two properties for expense. One is ID, one is string. Okay, and what we are going to do is when we get the user data, let's look at that. This ID and this name will come over here. So now expense, I need to import that. Right, this is imported. And then this is going to come from material dart. Once this is done, we need to initialize the expense thing. So how do we do that? So let's just say we have expense card constant this, because if you remember, I removed the constructor, right? So what we will do is we will keep the basic stuff which was already there, key, and how was it? This is, I think we need to call the super function with key. Okay, the only thing which I'm gonna do over here is I'll have a required property which is this dot expense. If it doesn't make sense to you right now, what I'm trying to do expense card, right? I will create an instance of expense card when I get the data. So at that point, I'm going to send that JSON data to this particular widget. And then in here, what we are going to do is, let's say padding constant, padding I think is edge inside insets, right? Insets, and I'll do 18.0. And here I'll have, because it's a container, it will have a child text card. Let's just do a constant and first see whether we are getting this data or not. So this is our card. Main.dart is loading expenses, which is fine. Expenses is this thing. Now what we will do is at this bottom navigation, this floating button, these will continue to be there as it is. Just instead of that text thing, we will have expense list. Hey, what happened? Oh, my bad. I'll have to create that component. Let's just create expense list.dart. Expense list.dart is going to be a, how do you say, stateful Flutter. How does that come? Yes, stateful widget. This stateful widget will be used to render in the main page. Okay, let me do that. Container, hold on. So I'll first need to import material. That's fine. It's a container. I think that's not a problem. Expenses.dart, I will use expense list, the component which we just created, and it can be constant for now. So yes, everything is empty. And as you can see right now, we have expenses. Just a second. So main.dart is calling expenses, right? Expenses is calling the expenses list. This is fine. Now list needs to somehow return the expense card. Okay, so instead of container, I'll do expense card. Okay, and in here, how do I pass the data? So expense ID is 1, name, let's just say, is Amitav. Okay, so why is this showing as card? Because I think we would have expense types, right? This is fine. Expense card has this hard-coded thing over here, which if I can get rid of and do this dot expense name and then remove this constant. Why is it? Oh, sorry, this is not required. Remove this expression. Yes. And if I now save it, you can see this basic thing is coming up. So what is happening? Main.dart is calling the expenses component, which is our page. Right now it is a page because we are calling this because the main page and the expenses page are the same. We haven't used the routing, so just bear with me. But then in here we are calling the expense list, and the expense list is where all the magic is going to happen. This is where we are calling the card. But then right now we haven't made any HTTP calls. So how do we do that? So the first thing to make an HTTP call is do import. There is HTTP package. Okay, this one is HTTP Dart. The only thing is I'm typing this out because I want this package to be referenced as HTTP. This just makes things a little easy. All right. So after that, we will create a function called fetch expenses, which will be responsible for obviously fetching the expenses. This is where the expense API call will be made. So we have a function called fetch expense. Now this is going to be an async function, and we need to define the type. So how does Dart understand something is going to come later on? I mean, there will be a delay, right? Async functions will mean that there will be an await, and await means it is not going to resolve immediately. So what they have is called future. Okay, it's an interesting term. So in future, I'm expecting a list of what? Of expenses, of expense, sorry, right? We need to term it properly. So this function fetch expense is going to return us a list of expense. This future is very much like a promise. So final response is equal to await HTTP. Let's just reference that. It has a get URL. Inside the get URL, don't pass the URL directly. Okay, it doesn't work that way. It has to be URI dot parse. Inside double quotes we have this. That's fine. This is fine. But then once we make the HTTP call, we will have to see whether we get the response dot status code as 200 or not. If it is not 200, we will throw an exception. The message will be failed to load expenses. And right, what happened? I think it's complaining because of the return. Yes, that's fine. We are going to handle that. So if we are getting a status code of 200, that means the API call was made and we got some data. So why don't we take that data into a JSON response first? So we do JSON.decode. Seems quite like JavaScript. So yeah, I was quite happy to get this function. Right. We have a list called JSON response. And this function is going to return, when we get the JSON response, we do a map, okay, because it is a list. And instead of E, I will do a data. Okay, that makes more sense. And if you remember, we created a function inside expense called from JSON. And that's where we are going to send our data. Why? Because we are expecting a JSON string over here, right? And when it gets the JSON string, it is going to create an instance of expense where the ID will be the JSON.id and name will be JSON.name, right? And that's the beauty. Then we run a to list on it, because in the end, we are expecting a list of expenses, right? So expense, how? Because we are creating an instance of expense, and finally we are converting it into a list. A lot of things have been done, but we haven't checked whether our code is even working or not. So let's see how we can do that. Right. So we have a function which is fetch response, but we haven't called it yet, right? We can do that inside our state. And the way we do that is there is a method called void, oops, not capital V, and not a C as well. Void, I think init state. Oops, why is it not working? Init state. Yes, this is the one. And here, what I will do is I will call the function, and maybe I'll do print JSON response over here. And let's bring up our debugger and see if we are getting something. Is there an error? I don't think so. Let us reload. Oh yes, by the way, if you make any changes, right, it's a hot reload. So what I have seen is the Ajax call doesn't work. Maybe because I have a feeling, and I need to confirm that, we are not making a state change as of now. Okay. And hence it doesn't reload the component, the widget, right? And hence, if I make any change, for example, if I do this, you can see it reloaded, but the Ajax call was not made. But in here, if I restart, the JSON comes in. Okay, so that is something which I need to explore. But my understanding is, because I'm not making a state level change, that's the reason this is not working. But yeah, let's see. Okay, now this is where we will create a list, but the list needs to get the data. So first things first, we will do final, okay, list. Oh, by the way, this is not a final. The expense, let's see what type of data we have. We have future list expense, right? So why don't we do that? Expense. And what does it say? Right. I knew this is going to come. So late is, keyword which suggests that this variable is not going to come immediately. Okay. If you, can I click on it? No. Okay. Fair enough. Let's just go with it. So this is the variable, and maybe in the next video what I will try to do is add it to the state, because I haven't seen how state works in Flutter as of now. Okay. Anyways, so expense is equal to fetch expense. So now ideally, because this is a variable inside the class, I should be able to get that variable inside my build method. But then the question is, how do we render our list? To render our list, we have to do something called as, we use future builder. Okay. Widget that builds itself based on latest snapshot of interaction with a future. Wow. Quite interesting, right? So I'll tell you what basically is happening over here. Future builder is going to work with data types which are of type future. So the future builder needs the data. So we are saying future is expense. Expense is a bad name, right? It should be expenses. It doesn't make sense to have a single expense as the variable. Okay, so the first parameter which we are passing over here is future, which means this is the data which the future builder is going to work with. And then it needs the builder method. And the builder method, give me the hint, please. Yeah. So the builder method has a context and snapshot. And once we get into the snapshot is the data which we get from the future builder. Okay. And so the first thing which we will have to check is if snapshot has data. Then we need to check snapshot has error. Last but not the least, the else. Now what is this else? First, let's understand the most simplest of things. Return constant text loading data. Okay. This is what is happening over here. Error in data, got data. Can we save it? No, I think there's some error. Late initialized field expenses has not been initialized. Wow, what happened? Expense card. This is anyways not required, so I'm not too much worried about that. Where is the error? Is there some error happening? I don't know. Let me reload. Yes. So it does complain about something. Expenses has not been initialized. And why is it saying that? Expenses is here. When the exception was thrown, this was the stack. Okay, let's see. Expense list doesn't have a constructor where I will need to pass something. So what is the problem? I don't think it's inside the expense list. I mean, it's not inside the expense. Okay, let's move ahead and see what the problem could be. I'm not able to understand exactly what is happening. So let me run the debugger again. And in the meantime, we will try to build the snapshot. Use the snapshot to create our list view. Okay. So if we have our snapshot, then we create a new list of expense. Okay. The only thing is it can be optional. Question mark. Okay. What happened? ADB. The APK didn't install. Wow. Is it because I'm making some edits? I don't know. Shouldn't have happened. Sorry. Let's hope this time it is able to run. I think finally something happened and it might just load this time. Right. Great. So the error is not coming. I don't see that, um, you know, thing which was coming earlier. So I guess the code is correct. Obviously, even I was not able to understand why that was happening. Anyways, so we were at the place where we are saying that when the snapshot has data, we are going to create a list of expense. Okay. Which is going to be snapshot data. Now, what is the problem? Change list object type to object type annotation. Make expense nullable. Okay, yes, this can be nullable. So yes, I don't see a problem with that. What happened now? Add cast. No, I don't want to do this. List expense equals this. Okay. Okay, let's just go with this and we will see. Seems a bit redundant because snapshot.data as this and then expense list really doesn't make sense. Anyways, so return list view. Okay. And list view dot builder. Inside list view dot builder, first things first, we will give them the item count, and that will be expense dot length, and this will work. And then obviously item builder, that is important. In here, the context, this is going to be build context. Okay, and the index is int. In this thing, first let's return a text and just see what is happening now. Okay, so can you see how many are this? 1 2 3 4 5, 3 to 5, right? So these are 10. How is this coming here? This is coming here because we have the snapshot data, right, which is coming because of the future data, which is the expenses. Expenses is basically coming from the fetch expense, which is our API call, right? So we got the data, we passed it to the builder. Okay, the future builder is creating this list view, and inside this we are getting our individual items, right? So that's how this is working. And now what I can do is, instead of actually doing this text, let's create expense card. Okay, inside expense card, I will do ID. Expense card needs the expense object. The ID is going to be expense. The index and ID. The only thing is it can be null. Sorry, so we need to keep it like this. Okay. Similarly, name. Why is it not giving me the hint? Oh, sorry. Wrong place, right? So expense this dot name. And can you see this hinting is coming? And you know why? Because we created, we have typecasted it. So it understands what kind of data we are sending it. Okay. This is correct. All right. So we can already see the data is coming over here. Let's reload. How can I get a more user set? How many albums do we have? Albums. Okay, we have quite a few albums. It has ID and it has title. Okay. Let me see if I can do that to get that, list, because I don't see the scroll right now. First of all, we need to come over here. No, not this. Expense class, right? Inside our expense class, this will become title. This becomes title. and obviously then this becomes title and this becomes title as well. Now obviously this is going to break because this will be title. You need to send a title. Okay. And somehow the card is failing because this is expense dot title. Right. What happened? Okay. It says type null is not. Oh, my bad. I'm so sorry. Expense list. It is failing on the build because it is not getting that name, right? Okay. Loading data. Is there a problem? Right. It's taking time. Right. Okay. I don't know what happened. I just restarted and things are coming back and I can actually scroll and see the infinite list working. So this is the beauty of the nice little, future builder using the list view to give us this infinite list. The only thing which I definitely want to add over here is some kind of a boundary. Okay, that thing doesn't look good. Let's try and see how we can add a boundary to it. Sorry, a divider. Okay, so over here we are using expense card, right? So expense card in itself will not allow us to give a divider. So I can do a container. Container can take, hey, what happened? Oh, sorry, not container. I'll have to do a column because column can take multiple children's. Okay, it can take array of children's. And so in that, the first one will be a divider like so. And then the next one is expense card. Hit save. And can you see this strange looking thing? This is not a big problem. Basically what is happening is inside the column, I will show you. Inside the column, the cross-axis alignment is set to center by default. Now, what is the cross-axis? The main axis in column is this, okay, from top to bottom, but the cross-axis is left to right, and this left to right is set as center. So if we come over here, do cross-axis alignment as cross-axis alignment, right? So cross-axis alignment dot start, hit save, everything is aligned, right? So here, this is how we have created our expense list, a nice looking list view, which is a little difficult for me to scroll through the trackpad. I don't know why. Okay, now it is working fine, right? And yeah, we made HTTP call to fetch the data from this placeholder API. So to quickly recap, we have our main.dart where we are calling this page, which is expenses. Expenses, this page is right now doing nothing. It just calls the expense list. Expense list is the main component where, first of all, we have this fetch expense function. This fetch expense function is calling this API. It is making this JSON response and returning us a future list of expenses. Okay. Now this future list of expenses, we are taking it inside our class, the state class, right? And we are assigning it to expenses. And then we call the init state. Init state is where we call that function and we assign the data which is coming from that into our expenses. That is a data type of late, which means our state class understands that this is not going to resolve immediately. It can be null at some point. Okay. So we get this expenses and then we go into the build function. Inside the build function, we have this future builder, which works with this future data. Okay. And then this is the builder function where we are checking the snapshot, creating a list. We do the list builder, set the item count, item builder, and we have our entire thing. We even added a column so that we can get this divider. So yeah, that's how we create a list view by calling data from an HTTP URL. If you like this video, do click on the thumbs up icon and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.